The gleaming chrome and glass surfaces of the orbital station Meridian reflected the distant blue marble of Earth below. Marcus Ashford adjusted his platinum cufflinks as he strode through the luxury dining section of the station's most exclusive restaurant, Stellar Heights. His net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations, built from asteroid mining operations and interplanetary shipping networks that spanned 3 solar systems. The restaurant buzzed with the quiet conversations of Earth's elite, politicians, corporate moguls, and space industry titans who could afford the astronomical cost of dining among the stars. Crystal chandeliers hung suspended in the artificial gravity field, their light dancing across tables set with real Earth-imported linens and silverware that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Marcus had specifically requested Table 7, positioned beside the massive viewport that offered an unobstructed view of the Martian colonies twinkling like distant jewels. Tonight's dinner meeting would secure his acquisition of the last independent shipping company in the Outer Rim, effectively giving him a monopoly on all cargo transport beyond Jupiter. As he approached his reserved table, a young woman in the restaurant's standard black uniform moved gracefully between the tables, carrying a tray of exotic delicacies. Her name tag read Zara, and her dark skin seemed to absorb and reflect the starlight streaming through the viewports. She moved with an efficiency that spoke of years of experience, despite appearing to be in her early 20s. Marcus barely glanced at her as he settled into his chair, immediately pulling out his quantum communicator to review stock reports. The Martian shipping lanes were performing exceptionally well, and his latest investment in automated mining drones had yielded profits that exceeded even his ambitious projections. Zara approached with a warm smile, her voice professional and clear. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Stellar Heights. May I start you with something to drink while you wait for your party?" Marcus didn't look up from his device. "Centauri wine, the 2157 vintage. And make sure the bottle has been properly temperature-controlled during transport. Last time someone served me wine that had been jostled during shipping, and it was completely ruined." "Of course, sir. I'll ensure it's perfect." Zara's smile remained steady as she made notes on her digital pad. 20 minutes later, Marcus's business associates arrived, Helena Reeves from the Jupiter Mining Consortium, and Director Walsh from the Colonial Transportation Authority. They were the key players he needed to convince for his monopoly plan. As they settled around the table, Marcus finally looked up to see Zara returning with his wine. "Finally," Marcus muttered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Do you people understand that time is money? Some of us are conducting business worth more than this entire station." Zara carefully presented the bottle, showing Marcus the label. "The 2157 Centauri Reserve, sir. Would you like to taste it first?" Marcus waved dismissively. "Just pour it, and bring the appetizer menu. We don't have all night to waste on your restaurant's theatrical presentations." As Zara poured the wine with practiced precision, Marcus continued his conversation with his associates, occasionally making pointed comments about service standards and how certain types of people weren't suited for high-end establishments. His voice carried across the restaurant, causing other diners to glance uncomfortably in their direction. "The problem with these service positions," Marcus declared, loud enough for Zara to hear as she set down wine glasses, "is that they attract people who lack ambition and intelligence. They're content to serve their betters instead of trying to better themselves." Zara's hand didn't shake as she completed pouring, though something flickered briefly in her eyes. Not anger, but something deeper and more controlled. Helena Reeves shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Marcus, perhaps we should focus on the shipping contracts." "Nonsense," Marcus interrupted, warming to his subject. "This is exactly the kind of systemic problem affecting our industries. We're expected to maintain standards while dealing with subpar personnel who think showing up is enough." He turned to Zara, who was finishing with the wine service. "Tell me, girl, what's your educational background? Did you even finish basic schooling before ending up here serving tables? The restaurant had grown noticeably quieter, conversations stopping at nearby tables as other diners sensed the tension building. Zara straightened, meeting Marcus's gaze directly for the first time. I completed my education, sir. Will there be anything else with the wine? Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. I'm sure you did. Let me guess, some online certificate program or community college degree. That's what passes for education among your demographic these days. Director Walsh cleared his throat nervously. Marcus, I really think we should review those shipping manifests. In a moment, Marcus cut him off, his attention fixed on Zara. I'm making a point about the declining standards in service industries. Look at her. Probably thinks she's accomplished something by memorizing wine varieties and learning to carry a tray without dropping it. The cruelty in his voice was unmistakable now. Other diners were openly staring, some looking disgusted by the display. But Marcus was caught up in his own sense of superiority, feeding off what he perceived as his captive audience. You know what the real problem is? Marcus continued, his voice rising. People like her think they deserve respect just for existing. They don't understand that respect is earned through achievement, through building something meaningful with your life. Instead, they want participation trophies for showing up to minimum wage jobs. Zara had remained perfectly still throughout the tirade, her expression calm and professional. But now she took a small step forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the hushed restaurant. You're absolutely right, Mr. Ashford. Respect should be earned through achievement. Marcus smiled triumphantly, thinking he had found validation for his views. Exactly. Finally, someone who understands, which is why, Zara continued, her voice growing stronger, I'm curious about your reaction when you learned that the quantum propulsion system powering this station, the artificial gravity generators keeping us comfortable, and the atmospheric processors that allow us to breathe up here were all designed by someone who once worked as a waitress to pay for her doctorate in theoretical physics. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's smile faltered, confusion replacing his smug satisfaction. What are you talking about? He demanded. Zara reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small device that looked like a standard employee communicator. But as she activated it, holographic displays sprang to life around the table. Technical schematics, patent documents, and university credentials that made Helena Reeves gasp audibly. Dr. Zara Okafor, Zara said simply. I hold 3 doctorates from Cambridge Interplanetary University, 17 patents in quantum mechanics, and my research in gravitational field manipulation made commercial space habitation economically viable for the first time in human history. Marcus stared at the holographic displays, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The patents alone were worth billions, technologies that his own companies relied on for their operations. But, you're working as a waitress, he stammered. I'm working undercover, Zara replied, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal something far more formidable underneath. Investigating reports of systematic discrimination and exploitation in service industries across the orbital platforms. Your treatment of service staff has been documented across multiple establishments, Mr. Ashford. Tonight was simply the most recent example. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If Dr. Okafor was conducting an official investigation, if she had documentation of his behavior patterns, if she had the authority to impact his business licenses for orbital operations. The Orbital Ethics Commission takes a very dim view of corporate executives who abuse service personnel, Zara continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect in boardrooms and research laboratories. Particularly when those executives are seeking expanded operating permits for interplanetary shipping monopolies. Helena Reeves had gone pale, clearly recognizing the implications for their planned business deal. Director Walsh was frantically checking his own communicator, probably trying to verify Zara's credentials through official channels. Marcus felt the carefully constructed foundations of his evening, and potentially his business empire, beginning to crumble around him. The woman he had dismissed and insulted wasn't just a waitress. She was one of the most brilliant minds of her generation, and he had just provided her with documented evidence of the exact kind of behavior that could destroy everything he had built. The other diners in the restaurant were no longer just uncomfortable witnesses to an ugly scene. They were now audience to what might become one of the most spectacular downfalls in recent corporate history, all triggered by a billionaire's inability to treat another human being with basic respect. As Marcus sat in stunned silence, Zara calmly gathered the wine glasses she had just poured. Her movements as graceful and professional as they had been when she first approached the table. But now that grace carried a different weight, the confidence of someone who had just revealed that she held the power to reshape the very industry that Marcus thought he controlled. The quantum communicator in Marcus's hand buzzed with an incoming priority message, but he couldn't bring himself to look at it. Something told him that whatever news it contained would only make his situation worse. The emergency session of the Orbital Ethics Commission convened at 0800 hours the following morning in the administrative section of Meridian Station. Dr. Zara Okafor sat at the witness table, no longer wearing a waitress uniform but dressed in the formal attire of a respected scientist and investigator. Her transformation was complete. Gone was any trace of the subservient service worker Marcus Ashford had attempted to humiliate. Commissioner Elena Vasquez reviewed the evidence displayed on the chamber's main screen. Hours of recorded conversations, documented incidents across multiple space platforms, and testimony from dozens of service workers who had experienced similar treatment from various corporate executives. The investigation had been running for 6 months, but last night's incident had provided the most damning evidence yet. Dr. Okafor, Commissioner Vasquez began, please walk us through your methodology for this investigation. Zara activated a holographic display showing the network of orbital platforms where she had worked undercover. The investigation began when we received multiple complaints about systemic abuse of service personnel by high-ranking corporate executives. The pattern was consistent across platforms, wealthy individuals using their economic position to demean and exploit workers they perceived as inferior. She highlighted specific locations on the display. I spent 2 weeks at each establishment documenting interactions while performing actual service work. This wasn't mere observation. I needed to understand the full scope of how these individuals behave when they believe they're speaking to someone beneath their social status. Commissioner Chen, a veteran of interplanetary labor disputes, leaned forward. And what did you discover? The abuse wasn't limited to verbal harassment, Zara replied, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of controlled anger. Workers reported having wages withheld for minor infractions, being forced to work double shifts without compensation, and facing termination for attempting to report mistreatment. The corporate executives involved used their influence to ensure complaints never reached official channels. Marcus Ashford sat in the gallery section, his usual confidence completely shattered. His legal team flanked him, but even his high-powered attorneys seemed subdued by the mountain of evidence being presented. The man who had built an interplanetary empire through ruthless business practices now looked small and defeated. Mr. Ashford's behavior last night, Zara continued, represented the culmination of a pattern we've observed repeatedly. He demonstrated clear belief that his wealth entitled him to treat service personnel as objects rather than human beings. His comments revealed deep-seated prejudices that extended beyond mere rudeness into genuine discrimination. The recording from the previous evening played on the main screen, Marcus's voice echoing through the chamber as he delivered his cruel commentary about education, ambition, and what he perceived as Zara's demographic limitations. Several commissioners visibly winced at the venom in his words. Commissioner Rodriguez, who specialized in corporate oversight, studied the financial records displayed alongside the recording. Dr. Okafor, how significant are Mr. Ashford's business operations to the orbital economy? Substantial, Zara admitted. Ashford Interplanetary controls approximately 30% of all cargo shipping beyond Mars, and his mining operations provide essential resources for the outer colonies. However, this investigation has revealed that his company's success has been built partially on exploiting vulnerable workers who had no recourse for complaints. She gestured to another section of the holographic display. We documented wages below minimum standards, safety violations in mining operations, and systematic intimidation of workers who attempted to organize for better conditions. Mr. Ashford's treatment of service personnel wasn't an isolated incident. It reflected the corporate culture he's fostered across his entire business empire. Helena Reeves, who had witnessed the previous night's confrontation, was called to testify. As she took the witness chair, her discomfort was obvious. The Jupiter Mining Consortium had its own labor issues, and she clearly understood that this investigation could expand beyond Ashford Interplanetary. Ms. Reeves, Commissioner Vasquez prompted, please describe what you observed last evening. Helena's voice was barely audible as she recounted the incident. Mr. Ashford was exceptionally cruel. His comments weren't just rude, they were designed to humiliate. He seemed to take pleasure in what he perceived as his superiority over Dr. Okafor. Did you attempt to intervene or moderate his behavior? Helena's pause stretched uncomfortably long. I suggested we focus on business matters, but I didn't directly confront his treatment of Dr. Okafor. I was concerned about jeopardizing our business relationship. So you prioritized commercial interests over human dignity? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Helena's inability to answer spoke volumes about the corporate culture that had allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked. Director Walsh from the Colonial Transportation Authority provided similar testimony, describing his own failure to intervene despite clear recognition that Ashford's behavior was unacceptable. The pattern emerged of a business environment where abuse was tolerated, even enabled, as long as it didn't interfere with profit margins. Dr. Okafor returned to the witness table for cross-examination by Ashford's legal team. His lead attorney, Jonathan Pike, attempted to challenge her methodology and motivations. Dr. Okafor, isn't it true that you intentionally deceived Mr. Ashford about your identity in order to entrap him into behavior you could then use against him? Zara's response was calm but forceful. I revealed my true identity only after Mr. Ashford chose to engage in discriminatory behavior. His actions weren't prompted by deception. They reflected his genuine beliefs about how people in service positions should be treated. But surely you understand that working undercover created an artificial situation. Nothing artificial about it, Zara interrupted. Every other service worker who has experienced Mr. Ashford's abuse was genuinely dependent on their employment for survival. They couldn't reveal advanced degrees or prestigious careers because they didn't have them. The only difference was that I had the luxury of revealing the truth when his behavior crossed the line into actionable discrimination. Pike pressed further. Isn't it possible that Mr. Ashford simply had a bad evening and acted out of character? Zara activated another holographic display, this one showing a timeline of documented incidents spanning 3 years. Mr. Ashford's behavior last night was entirely consistent with reported incidents across multiple platforms. We have testimony from 47 different service workers who experienced similar treatment. This wasn't an aberration. It was his standard operating procedure. The evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings from security cameras, audio captured by recording devices worn by other undercover investigators, financial records showing systematic wage theft, and safety reports revealing dangerous working conditions across Ashford's operations. Commissioner Vasquez reviewed the final summary prepared by the investigation team. Dr. Okafor, what are your recommendations for addressing these violations? Mr. Ashford's companies should face immediate suspension of their orbital operating licenses pending comprehensive review of their labor practices, Zara replied without hesitation. All affected workers should receive full compensation for wage theft and punitive damages for harassment. Additionally, mandatory corporate culture training should be implemented across the entire organization. The financial implications were staggering. Suspending Ashford Interplanetary's operating licenses would cost the company millions of credits per day, while the compensation requirements could reach into the billions. For a man accustomed to unlimited wealth and power, the prospect of financial ruin was almost incomprehensible. Marcus finally stood to address the commission, his voice hoarse and defeated. I want to apologize for my behavior. I realize now that I was wrong, and I'm prepared to accept responsibility for my actions. Commissioner Chen regarded him skeptically. Mr. Ashford, this commission has reviewed extensive evidence of systematic abuse spanning multiple years. Your apology, while noted, doesn't address the scope of harm your actions have caused to hundreds of workers. I understand, Marcus replied, though his tone suggested he was still struggling to fully comprehend how completely his world had changed. What do I need to do to make this right? Dr. Okafor leaned forward. Making it right isn't about what you need to do, Mr. Ashford. It's about understanding what you've already done. Every person you dismissed as inferior, every worker you underpaid, every individual you treated as less than human, they all deserve the same respect you demand for yourself. The chamber fell silent as the commissioners prepared to deliberate. Marcus Ashford, the man who had controlled vast reaches of space just 24 hours earlier, now faced the possibility that his empire might crumble because he had forgotten the most basic principle of human decency. As the session recessed, Marcus caught a glimpse of Dr. Okafor gathering her materials. The woman he had tried to humiliate now held his future in her hands, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The billionaire who had shouted at a waitress was about to learn that respect indeed had to be earned, and once lost, it was incredibly difficult to regain. 6 months after the Orbital Ethics Commission's ruling, Marcus Ashford stood in the cafeteria of the Meridian Station Worker Rehabilitation Center, serving lunch to a line of construction workers who were building the new expanded medical facility. His hands, once soft from a lifetime of luxury, were now calloused from months of manual labor and food service work. The commission's sentence had been unprecedented in its scope and creativity. Rather than simply imposing fines and suspending licenses, they had ordered Marcus to complete a year of community service working in the exact roles he had disparaged. He spent his mornings in food service, his afternoons doing maintenance work, and his evenings attending mandatory education sessions about labor rights and human dignity. Ashford Interplanetary had been placed under temporary management while Marcus completed his rehabilitation program. The company's assets were frozen except for funds needed to compensate the workers who had been mistreated. His personal fortune, once measured in the hundreds of billions, had been reduced to a basic living allowance, while the rest was distributed to establish worker protection funds across the orbital platforms. Dr. Zara Okafor entered the cafeteria as Marcus was cleaning tables after the lunch rush. She wore her scientist's attire now, her undercover days completed with the successful conclusion of the investigation. Several other executives from major corporations had been caught in the expanded probe that followed Marcus's case, leading to sweeping reforms in corporate behavior across the space-based economy. "Mr. Ashford," she said, approaching the table he was sanitizing. Marcus looked up, his expression no longer carrying any trace of the arrogance that had defined him 6 months earlier. The combination of physical labor, financial humiliation, and constant interaction with the workers he had previously dismissed had fundamentally changed him. "Dr. Okafor," he replied, setting down his cleaning cloth. "I heard you were visiting the station. How can I help you?" The simple question represented a complete reversal from their first interaction. Marcus now instinctively responded to others with offers of assistance rather than demands for service. "I wanted to check on your progress," Zara said, studying his face carefully. "The commission is preparing their 6-month review, and your case has become a model for corporate rehabilitation programs across the solar system." Marcus nodded, his hands unconsciously rubbing at the calluses that had formed from constant work. "I didn't understand before. I thought work like this was beneath me because I didn't understand what it actually involved. Every person I serve, every table I clean, every machine I maintain, there's skill involved, dignity in the effort, value in the contribution." Zara sat down across from him, her manner less formal than during their previous official interactions. "What's been the most difficult part of this experience?" "The shame," Marcus replied immediately. "Not the work itself. I actually find some of it satisfying in ways I never expected. But knowing how many people I hurt, how many lives I made more difficult because of my arrogance, that keeps me awake at night." He gestured toward the workers finishing their meals around them. "These people have been incredibly kind to me, even though they know who I am and what I did. They've taught me more about character in 6 months than I learned in 50 years of running corporations." A construction worker named Ahmed approached their table, recognizing Dr. Okafor from news coverage of the investigation. "Dr. Okafor, I wanted to thank you again for what you did. My daughter is studying engineering now because she saw how you changed things for people like us." Zara smiled warmly. "That's wonderful news. What's her specialty?" "Atmospheric systems design," Ahmed replied proudly. "She wants to work on the new terraforming projects for the outer colonies. Says if a waitress can redesign space station technology, maybe a construction worker's daughter can redesign whole planets." After Ahmed returned to his table, Marcus spoke quietly. "Stories like that happen every day now. People who thought education was out of reach, careers they never imagined possible, all because your investigation showed them that intelligence and worth aren't determined by economic status." Zara studied Marcus carefully. "And what about you? What happens when your rehabilitation period ends?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question that had occupied his thoughts for weeks. "I've been thinking about that a lot. The commission will return control of my companies eventually, but I don't think I want to run them the same way anymore." "What would you do differently?" "Everything," Marcus replied with conviction. "Worker ownership programs, profit sharing, educational opportunities for all employees regardless of their current role. I want to build companies that lift people up instead of keeping them down." Dr. Okafor leaned back, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "That's a significant change from the man who thought respect should only flow upward." "That man was a fool," Marcus said bluntly. "I spent decades accumulating wealth and power while completely missing the point of what makes life meaningful. I thought success meant having others serve me, but real success means serving others." A young woman in workers' coveralls approached their table hesitantly. "Excuse me, Mr. Ashford. I'm Maria Santos. I work in cargo processing, and I wanted to thank you." Marcus looked confused. "Thank me? I don't understand." "The worker education program you proposed. It was approved yesterday," Maria explained excitedly. "I'm going to be able to study quantum engineering while I work. My supervisor said the company will pay for the courses and give me time off for labs." Marcus's face showed genuine pleasure. "That's fantastic, Maria. You should be proud. Those programs are competitive." "I never would have applied before," Maria admitted. "I didn't think someone like me belonged in university courses. But after seeing how Dr. Okafor worked undercover as a waitress and how you've been working alongside us these past months, I realized that what matters is what you can learn and contribute, not where you start." After Maria left, Zara observed Marcus's reaction carefully. "You seem genuinely happy about her opportunity." "I am," Marcus replied without hesitation. 6 months ago, I would have seen her ambition as a threat to the natural order. Now I see it as exactly what our companies need: intelligent, motivated people who understand both the theoretical and practical sides of our operations. The afternoon shift change brought a new wave of workers into the cafeteria, and Marcus excused himself to begin preparing for dinner service. Zara watched as he moved easily among his co-workers, joking with the kitchen staff and coordinating efficiently with the service team. His integration into the worker community appeared complete and genuine. Later that evening, Zara attended one of the mandatory education sessions that Marcus participated in as part of his rehabilitation. The topic was economic justice in post-scarcity societies, and she was surprised to see Marcus actively participating in discussions rather than simply attending to fulfill requirements. The fundamental problem, Marcus was saying to the group, is that we built our economic systems assuming scarcity would always exist. But when you can mine asteroids for unlimited resources and manufacture anything you need with quantum replicators, the old rules about competition and hierarchy don't make sense anymore. Another participant, a former mining executive named Thompson, who was also in the program, disagreed. But without competition and hierarchy, what motivates people to excel? Look around this room, Marcus replied. Every person here is working to better themselves, not because they're competing with others, but because they want to contribute something meaningful. Dr. Okafor didn't invent revolutionary technology to beat other scientists. She did it to solve problems that needed solving. The discussion continued for another hour, with Marcus demonstrating a depth of understanding about social and economic justice that would have been impossible for his previous incarnation. When the session ended, Zara approached him as other participants dispersed. "Your transformation appears to be complete," she observed. Marcus shook his head. "Not complete. Ongoing. I learn something new every day about how much I didn't understand before. The person who shouted at you in that restaurant feels like a stranger to me now, but I can't forget that he was real. He was me." "And now?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time since Zara had known him, the expression appeared completely genuine. "Now I'm trying to become someone worthy of the kindness people have shown me. Someone who builds up rather than tears down. Someone who serves rather than demands service." As they walked together toward the exit, Zara reflected on the unexpected success of the rehabilitation program. Marcus Ashford's transformation had exceeded even her optimistic projections, proving that even the most entrenched patterns of privilege and prejudice could be changed when confronted with consequences and alternative perspectives. The billionaire who had shouted at a waitress 6 months earlier was gone, replaced by a man who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in credits or power over others, but in the positive impact one could have on the lives around them. It was a lesson that would reshape not just his own future, but the entire structure of corporate responsibility across human space. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning.